What if the dog everyone feared was the only one who could save a child no one saw coming? At Haven Ridge Shelter, they called him unfixable. Too violent, too damaged. Most wouldn't even look him in the eye. But someone did. Not a trainer, not an expert, a 7-year-old girl with a crumpled drawing in her hand. This is the story of how one silent bond changed everything. Stay with me. It started with a scream, not the kind that fades quickly, but a sharp, panicked cry from the back of the shelter, one that made 2 volunteers drop their coffee and run. Claire heard it from across the yard. She was new at Haven Ridge, still learning the rhythms of the place. She ran too, clipboard still in hand, heart thudding harder than her feet. By the time she reached the kennels, chaos had already taken shape. One gate was bent open, twisted like soft metal. Fur clung to the edges, and on the ground, paw marks dug deep into the dirt, and in the middle of it all, him. Shadow. He stood frozen at the far end of the yard, black and tan coat bristled, teeth bared, saliva foaming at the edges of his mouth. His ears were flattened, his tail stiff, body crouched in defense. Staff were shouting orders. Someone grabbed the tranquilizer gun. Another pointed. He broke through again. That's the 3rd time. No one approached. They didn't need to. They all knew Shadow. The unadoptable one. 2 weeks ago, Animal Control brought him in after a call about a loose dog near a burned-down property. The fire had left nothing standing but blackened timbers. The dog was found nearby, alone, silent, ash in his fur, a half-melted chain fused around his neck. He hadn't barked when they picked him up, but he had growled, bit a trainer on his first day, broke through his first gate on the second. By the 3rd day, every staff member knew the rule. Do not enter his kennel. He is unpredictable, dangerous. They tried calling him other names. Canine reject, bomb dog gone bad, waste of a second chance. But most just called him what the label said in red marker, bold and permanent on his chart. Unadoptable. They sedated him when they needed to clean, when they needed to feed. 4 times in 10 days. Each time, he staggered into a corner and collapsed, trembling long after he was unconscious. Claire wasn't sure what to think yet. She stood just outside the chaos, her breath caught halfway. She didn't move, she didn't speak, she just watched him. And in the middle of all the yelling, what she saw wasn't rage, it wasn't wild, it wasn't even angry, it was lost. Shadow wasn't baring his teeth to attack, he was baring them to warn, to plead, like a cornered soul in a world that had already forgotten how to listen. The tranquilizer dart hit his side. He flinched, then stumbled, slowly lowering himself to the ground, panting hard, limbs twitching. Within seconds, his eyes glazed over, but his body kept trembling, even in sleep. In the staff room, the argument had already begun. He's not safe. We can't keep sedating him like this. We've tried treats, trainers, behaviorists. Nothing works. He's broken. Claire sat in the corner silent. She looked down at her hands, then out the window, toward the farthest kennel where Shadow now lay curled in a tight, guarded ball. That night, after the shelter had emptied, she came back. No clipboard, no leash, just her and a jar of peanut butter. She didn't open the gate. She didn't call his name. She simply sat cross-legged on the concrete, outside the enclosure. Shadow was awake, watching. Half his body still curled, but his eyes locked on hers. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Claire didn't flinch. She reached into her coat pocket, unscrewed the jar, and placed it near the bars. Close enough for him to reach, but not so close he'd feel threatened. Then she whispered, "You're not mean. You're scared. That's different." She stayed for 20 minutes. No talking, no coaxing, just quiet. The next morning, staff found the jar licked clean, but nothing else changed. Shadow still refused food if anyone was in the room. He still shredded every blanket they gave him, still growled when anyone reached in too far. But there was something new, something none of the others saw right away. When Claire sat outside his kennel, just sat, quiet, calm, he didn't growl, he didn't bark, he watched, still, waiting, as if trying to remember what it felt like not to be afraid. Others called it a fluke. Claire wasn't so sure. Nothing changed overnight. Shadow still refused to be touched, still tore up anything placed inside his kennel, still watched every staff member with suspicion so sharp it felt like barbed wire. But there was a shift, subtle, quiet. When Claire walked past, he didn't lunge. When she sat by his gate, silent, hands in her lap, he didn't growl. He just watched. Some days she read to him, Not training manuals or dog psychology books, real stories, simple ones. Children's books mostly. Gentle, slow-paced, rhythmic. The kind a child might whisper under a blanket, flashlight in hand. She didn't know why she brought them. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was hope. Shadow never moved closer. But he listened, and somehow that was enough to keep her coming back. The others thought she was wasting her time. He'll turn on you one day. This isn't some fairy tale. He's not a misunderstood puppy. He's dangerous. You're getting attached to something that won't end well. But Claire didn't care, because Shadow had stopped shaking when she sat outside his kennel. He had started eating again, only after she left the food, and the room went still. And once, just once, he crept forward when she hummed softly and sniffed the toe of her shoe before retreating like a ghost. Still, progress was painfully slow. Too slow for a place like Haven Ridge, where space was limited and time was rationed like medicine. So when Claire arrived one morning with her 7-year-old daughter in tow, more than a few eyebrows raised. "Claire, that's not safe. You brought a child here? Around him?" She nodded. Just for a moment. She wanted to see the shelter. That's all. The child's name was Emma. She was soft-spoken, small for her age, with a wild tangle of curls and an oversized backpack bouncing at her side. She walked with a quiet confidence that didn't come from boldness but from an inner calm most adults never learn to carry. When they reached Shadow's kennel, Claire crouched down. "You remember what I told you, sweetheart?" Emma nodded. "No sudden movements, no touching the fence, and if he growls, I don't move, I just stay still." Claire hesitated, heart tightening. But before she could say more, Emma stepped closer. She didn't flinch, she didn't reach out. She just crouched near the gate, set her backpack down, and whispered through the bars. "Hi, I had a dog like you once." He was scared too, but he got better. No one breathed. Staff stood frozen at a distance. Even Claire watched with her pulse thudding in her ears. Shadow moved, slowly, deliberately. His ears twitched, his body tensed. Then Emma pulled something from her pocket, a crumpled piece of paper. A drawing, hand-colored in bold crayon strokes, a dog with a heart floating over its head. She slid it gently under the bars. "This is for you," she said, "so you don't forget." Shadow stared. His nose twitched, then lowered. He didn't snarl. He didn't bark. He lay down, right there, right in front of the gate. Quiet. Still. For the first time since he had arrived, he rested with someone watching. And no one knew what to say. That night, Claire left the drawing inside the kennel. By morning, Shadow was lying beside it, nose barely touching the edge like it meant something he couldn't explain. Like it was the only proof he had that he wasn't alone. No one dared move it, not the vet tech, not the janitor during cleaning rounds. They just left it there. And Shadow never let it be far from him. Each day Claire brought Emma back, just for a few minutes. Each time, Shadow waited, at first from a distance, then a little closer. Then one day when Emma knelt by the gate and began to hum the same tune Claire often sang, he padded toward her, slow, cautious, head low, and sat, right in front of her. She smiled, wide and fearless. "You remember me now, don't you?" Shadow didn't answer, but his tail moved, just a twitch, almost imperceptible. But it moved. Claire watched it all from a few feet back, tears stinging her eyes. Something sacred was happening, and no training course could have prepared her for it. Later that week, Emma brought her favorite toy, a small, soft, pink plush dog, well-loved and a little worn at the ears. Claire crouched beside her. "Sweetheart, he might tear it up." Emma looked at her and said something Claire would never forget. "That's okay. He can bite it all he wants. It's for him to feel better." They opened the kennel gate just enough to toss the toy inside. Shadow stiffened, walked over, sniffed. Then, instead of shredding it, he picked it up, carried it gently to the corner, and lay beside it, like it was the most precious thing in the world. The shift didn't come with fanfare. No applause, no one shouting, "He's cured!" It came quietly, like morning light through an old window, slow, almost unnoticed, until everything was gently brighter than before. Shadow didn't growl when Emma approached anymore. He didn't bare his teeth. He watched her instead, calm, alert, like he was memorizing her face, her voice, the shape of her kindness. Other staff began to notice. "That's the kid he listens to, right? How's that possible? He won't even let the vet near him." Emma didn't do anything special. She just showed up. Each afternoon after school, her backpack bouncing behind her, she'd go straight to his kennel like it was the most natural part of her day. Sometimes she colored, sometimes she read aloud. Sometimes she just sat there, humming softly, leaning against the wall with her legs stretched out, eyes closed like she trusted him to keep her safe. Shadow would lie close to the gate now, paws stretched forward, head resting next to the little plush toy she'd given him. The drawing, creased and slightly torn at the edges, remained tucked near the corner. He never let anyone move it. Claire tried once, just to adjust the bedding. He growled. Not with rage, but warning. A low, guttural sound that said, "That stays." And yet, when Emma was near, he let his guard down. She could slide her fingers through the bars and brush his fur with slow, careful strokes. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He leaned in. For the first time since arriving, Shadow sought touch, but only from her. Claire tried once too, just a gentle hand near his shoulder. The growl came again, not vicious but firm, enough to tell her, not yet. It became clear to everyone, Shadow had made a choice. His trust, whatever fragile piece of it remained, belonged to Emma. And Emma? She never tried to make him perform. She didn't ask him to sit or fetch or prove he was better. She just let him be. Broken, bruised, healing, on his own terms. One afternoon she said it without meaning to. "He's not scary, Mommy. He's just tired." Claire didn't respond. She just nodded, her throat too tight to speak. That same week, the shelter director received a phone call. It was about a microchip. Shadow had been scanned the day he arrived, but the record was outdated until now. Someone had updated the registry. An elderly man named Mr. Whitaker. He lived 3 towns over. He claimed his dog, named Brutus, had been stolen a year ago during a break-in. He searched for months, filed police reports, posted flyers, but eventually he'd given up hope. He heard about a dog at Haven Ridge, a German shepherd, aggressive, alone, and he asked to come see him. The staff hesitated. What if Shadow didn't remember? What if it triggered something worse? Claire didn't sleep that night. Neither did Emma. What if he doesn't want to go? The little girl asked, hugging her blanket. Claire kissed her forehead. Then we'll let him choose. Friday came. The shelter felt heavier that morning, like it was holding its breath. Mr. Whitaker arrived just after 10 a.m. He was thin, his back slightly stooped, walking slowly with the help of a wooden cane. In his hand, he held a faded photograph, a younger version of himself on a porch, smiling beside a proud German shepherd. His voice cracked when he spoke. "He used to sleep right here, on my porch. For 8 years, he never let me feel alone." Staff brought him to the kennel. Shadow was already standing. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just watched. His ears perked, not in fear, but curiosity. Mr. Whitaker knelt, groaning softly as he lowered himself. He held up the photo, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn leather collar. The nameplate read, "Brutus. You saved my life once," he whispered. "You remember that, boy? That night I fell in the yard. You barked until the neighbor came. You always knew when something mattered." Shadow stepped forward. Not quickly, not confidently, but with something deeper, like memory rising from beneath the ash. He sniffed the air, took another step, then sat, still and silent, nose inches from the wire fence. Emma stood just behind Claire, holding her mother's hand. "Does he remember?" she whispered. Claire didn't answer, because she wasn't sure. Mr. Whitaker reached forward and set the collar gently on the ground. "You can come home if you want, but only if you're ready." Shadow didn't move. He turned, walked slowly to the far corner, picked up the crumpled drawing, placed it gently beside the pink plush toy, and lay down. With a sigh so heavy it pulled the room quiet. Mr. Whitaker didn't cry, he just nodded. "I guess you've already found your home." No one spoke. Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. "He loves you, sir. But this little girl, she healed something in him that none of us could." Mr. Whitaker gave a tired smile. "Then she deserves him." Outside, Emma waited at the gate. Shadow rose again, trotted forward, and sat beside her, head pressed gently into her hand. He didn't look back. Not at the collar, not at the man who once called him his own. It was a Saturday. Gray clouds hung low over Haven Ridge, casting everything in a quiet gloom. The shelter was calm, too calm. Claire noticed it the moment she walked in. Shadow paced his kennel. Not in anger, not out of boredom. Something else. Restless, alert, like he knew something wasn't right. Emma hadn't come by the day before. Claire figured she had a family errand, or maybe the weather had kept her home. But when the phone rang just after noon, the world shifted. It was Rachel, Emma's mother. Her voice was tight, barely holding itself together. Emma didn't come home from the library. She had walked there alone, just a few blocks. She never made it back. Police were already involved. Flyers going up. Neighbors out calling her name. Claire froze. Her eyes darted to Shadow. He had stopped pacing, now completely still. His ears were perked, eyes locked on her, breathing shallow, like he'd heard the voice on the phone, like he understood. And then he did something no one expected. He barked. Once. Sharp, focused, not a warning, not aggression, a command. Claire didn't hesitate. Against every rule, every regulation, every policy she'd once enforced, she grabbed the leash, snapped it on, opened the kennel. "Let's find her," she whispered. Shadow bolted, through the shelter gates, across sidewalks slick with rain, his nose to the wind, legs pounding the pavement like war drums. Claire followed, breath ragged, heart caught somewhere between panic and faith. He led her through back alleys, across schoolyards, behind old shops with shuttered windows. People turned to stare, a woman chasing a German shepherd with fire in his eyes. But no one stopped them. A few blocks from the shelter, near the back of an old bookstore, Shadow froze. He barked again, scratched at a narrow gate. Claire shoved it open. And there, Emma, curled beneath a broken overhang, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her lip was split. Her glasses were missing. Her eyes swollen from crying, but still open, breathing, alive. Shadow didn't bark again. He didn't whine. He walked to her, quiet as a whisper, and sat. Gently, he pressed his head against her shoulder. Emma's hands rose instantly, clutching his fur. She buried her face into him and began to sob. Claire fell to her knees beside them. Tears welled up, hot and burning. She didn't ask what had happened, didn't need to. She just wrapped her arms around both of them and held on. Sirens wailed in the distance. Rachel came running. Police began asking questions. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was this. Shadow had found her. No GPS, no voice command, no training, just instinct and love. That night at the hospital, while doctors cleaned Emma's scrapes and gently checked her ribs, Shadow waited. He didn't leave the hallway. Didn't eat. Didn't sleep. He lay by the door, still, focused, his body tense like a soldier on guard. Nurses whispered about him in awe. "Is that the same dog they said was dangerous?" "He hasn't moved in hours, just waits." Every time Emma whimpered, his ears twitched. Every time a new face came down the hall, his eyes followed, measuring, assessing, deciding. He didn't growl. But they didn't dare get too close. When Emma was discharged the next day, wrapped in a soft hoodie and walking gingerly beside her mother, Shadow stood. He walked slowly, deliberately, and when Emma reached for him, just her tiny fingers brushing his shoulder, he leaned into her, gently, carefully, like he knew exactly where she hurt and how not to make it worse. That embrace, quiet, fierce, wordless, was the only proof anyone needed, and soon, word spread. First in whispers, then in headlines. "Aggressive rescue dog saves missing girl." Local papers ran it. Blogs picked it up. Radio hosts spoke his name with surprise. The evening news showed clips of him walking beside Emma, still alert, still proud. People who once crossed the street to avoid his kennel now left flowers at the shelter gate. Treats, cards. Some just stood in silence, peeking through the fencing, eyes misty. "That's him? He found her? I can't believe it." But for Shadow, none of that mattered. He didn't seek applause. He didn't care for headlines. Each morning, his eyes still searched for only one thing. Emma. And when she returned, his tail wagged. Not wildly, but with that slow, steady rhythm of something deep and loyal. Claire watched all of it unfold with a kind of reverence. She had once believed some dogs simply couldn't be saved, that some wounds went too deep, that some fears couldn't be undone. But Shadow, no longer the unadoptable, no longer the liability, had shattered all of that. Not with tricks, not with obedience. With something quieter, truer. Faith. A week after the incident, the staff gathered for a meeting. Claire stood at the front, her voice trembling but steady. "Shadow has taught us something we forgot," she began. "He reminded us that no soul is beyond saving, and sometimes it's the broken ones who heal us most." She looked at Emma and Rachel seated in the front row. "We've had adoption offers from across the country, but there's only one place Shadow truly belongs." She knelt beside Emma. "If you'll have him, "He's yours." Emma gasped, looked to her mother. Rachel was already nodding through quiet, unstoppable tears. It was done. No longer a number, no longer a file. Shadow had a home, not in a kennel, not on a porch from the past, but in the heart of a little girl who had believed in him when no one else did. Life after that didn't become a fairy tale. It became something better, real, steady, gentle. Shadow adjusted to home life slowly, like someone learning to breathe after being underwater for too long. He didn't sleep in a bed at first. He slept by Emma's door, head on the threshold, body facing out like a sentinel. Every night she whispered the same thing before turning out the light. "Good night, Shadow. You're safe now." And every night he'd close his eyes only after hearing it. He followed her to school drop-off, waiting patiently in the car beside Rachel. He waited by the garden gate each afternoon, ears perking up the moment her voice floated over the fence. He didn't bark much, didn't chase balls or jump fences. He wasn't the kind of dog who needed constant play. He just needed proximity. To know Emma was there. To know she was okay. Claire visited often. She never tried to pet him again. Not until one afternoon in late spring when Shadow, lying beside Emma's swing, turned his head and nudged Claire's knee. She reached out slowly, touched the fur behind his ear. He didn't growl. He closed his eyes. It was the smallest of gestures, but to Claire it felt like forgiveness. Emma began to blossom. Her teachers noticed. She raised her hand more in class, spoke louder. She smiled in photos. Other kids stopped calling her the quiet one and started calling her the girl with the dog. Because wherever Emma went, Shadow followed. Not far, not fast, but always. At the park, he sat beneath her bench. At home, he curled up beside her reading nook. When she had nightmares, he was already there, head pressed gently into her side before she even called out. Rachel often said it out loud, even if Emma already knew. "He didn't just save you, honey. He stayed." The town never forgot either. A month after the rescue, the mayor invited Emma and Shadow to a small ceremony in the park. Nothing grand. Just folding chairs, a podium, and a few dozen neighbors. But when they called his name and handed him a golden tag, heart-shaped, engraved with the words, "To the dog who saved a child and showed us what loyalty means," Emma didn't cheer. She simply knelt beside him and whispered, "You already had my medal." Years passed like soft rain, slow, gentle, unnoticed, until everything had quietly changed. Emma grew taller, her curls stayed wild, her voice grew stronger. Shadow grew slower, his muzzle grayed, his walks shortened, but every morning he still padded down the hallway and waited outside her door. Every evening he still lay beneath her desk as she studied, and every time she sat quietly, a little sad or tired from the world, his head would find her lap like it always had, silent, steady. On the day she graduated high school, Emma wore a soft blue dress. In her hand she carried a photo, old, a little worn. It showed her, age 7, holding Shadow's leash for the very first time. He was sitting tall, ears perked, beside a crumpled drawing taped to the shelter wall. He couldn't climb the stage that day, but from the front row, he watched. When she accepted her diploma, she didn't raise it high or wave, she just looked down, met his eyes, and smiled. That night, Rachel found her daughter curled beside him on the porch rug, a blanket draped over both of them. "He didn't move all day," Emma whispered. "Just waited." Shadow lifted his head, just enough to nudge her hand. Then he rested again. In the years that followed, Emma chose a quiet path. She didn't chase fame or tell Shadow's story to sell books. She started volunteering at shelters, spoke softly to the scared dogs no one wanted, carried peanut butter jars in her bag. She told people, sometimes the ones who growl the loudest are just asking if someone still believes in them. When Shadow's time finally came, it wasn't loud. It wasn't tragic, it was gentle. On a sunny afternoon with the window open and the breeze dancing through the trees, he lay on the rug by the garden, eyes half closed, body still. Emma, now a young woman, sat beside him. She stroked his head and whispered, "You saved me, Shadow, and I'll never forget." He didn't whimper, didn't flinch, he just let go. No one cried loudly. There were no long speeches, just a small ceremony beneath the oak tree in their backyard. Emma placed the heart-shaped tag in a wooden box, beside the old plush toy and a faded crayon drawing with a heart over a dog's head. She planted lavender above the grave, not for show, for peace. And sometimes when the wind moves just right, she swears she still hears a soft rustle behind her, like footsteps. or a tail brushing the grass. And she smiles, because love like that, real, fierce, and loyal, doesn't die, it just changes form and lives on in every heart it ever touched. If this story touched something in you, you're not alone. Some wounds take time, some healing comes in silence, and sometimes it just takes one person or one dog to believe. Type 1 in the comments if you've ever seen someone misjudged because of fear. Type 2 if you believe that trust and kindness can change even the hardest hearts. And if you want more stories like this, real, quiet, powerful, subscribe. We tell them here. For those who still believe in second chances.